Hello, guys. Hello. I think we are live.
Yeah, we are live.
Yes. Let me check the comments. How many people are joining? We'll wait for a few more minutes for rest of the people to join in, and then we will be starting off soon. Okay. So, hello, guys. This is Sharonika from Hello World Hacks team. And after 19th April, after our GitHub session, we are back again. And today we have a session on web development. And today, the speaker for our session probably needs no introduction at all. Like you're going to any sort of hackathon in West Bengal or outside, there is always this one guy with a bag running from one hackathon to the next one. He is none other than our speaker for today's session, Krishnendu. Dasgupta. And thank you, sir. Thank you so much. We are extremely grateful to have you on board with the Hello World Hacks team. He's also
Oh,
our mentor for web development. Thank you, sir. So today
first of all,
we'll
don't call me sir, okay? Like I'm your friend,
okay,
like all of you
Dada.
guys. Ekdom, sure, sure.
Okay. So Dada is all set today to share with you guys the ideas, the tips and tricks that you guys can use to win hackathon and extract the fun out of it. So yep, the stage is all for Krishnendu Dada. You may start with your session now. And guys, please interact. Please cooperate with Krishnendu Any sort of doubt, do cooperate and let us know.
Thank you, Sharanika. Thank you for the nice introduction. And yeah, am I audible properly?
Yeah, you are audible.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so hello everyone. Uh, let's start with the session. Is okay. Sorry. My screen is not being presented. Okay, share screen. Okay. Okay, can anyone confirm? Like, is my screen being shared?
Yes, right now it's been shared. You can continue.
Okay, thank you so much. So, hello everyone, welcome to today's session. Like, as Sharanika said, like it's going to be a web dev session regarding the nitty gritties of the web development and the things that you need to spin up a web app or in general any web system, not particularly any specific type of system in web, but a general on that. Yeah. So hi, I am Krishnendu Gupta, and yes, I am a mentor. I am a web mentor at Hello World Hacks. Okay. Okay. So the very first question comes about is like why web development? Why on earth we are going to learn web development? There are other various like fields of, shall I say, any profession. Why we are going to be going to be a web developer or choosing web development as our niche? So like primarily I have a very basic answer to this, but yeah, like there can be other creative answers, but yeah, let's proceed with this. So the most obvious reasons for being a web developer is like just to realize that you cannot be the best web developer because spiders are the best one. So yes, that's what is a myth regarding web development. But yeah, jokes apart, let's deep dive into it. So yes. So why we are going choosing web as our platform to develop something on? So yes, web is a very accessible tool nowadays. Like you see any people like of any area or any social strata or anything, whatever. Everyone has their phone, and in their phone there is a browser app, be it Chrome, be it Firefox, anything, and the web needs only a browser to run. Okay, so it's that accessible. Like web is almost I shouldn't claim in numbers, but almost if we go by numbers, it's like almost 99%, 99.9% accessible to the people. So yeah, that's one of the points to become to choose web as our platform. And then we have like recently there have been a tremendous development in the world of browsers. Like browsers are becoming feature rich, browsers are becoming optimized in the sense that they can implement a lot of stuffs in a very short like what to say consumption of memory, and they're getting advanced day by day. So yeah, we're seeing various types of browser updates rolling every now and then. And like the web is like moving so fast nowadays that you can present your users with very like modern app like experiences in a very like easy manner. And by easy manner I mean to say that there are very good APIs to deal with. And by APIs I don't mean like the server APIs, I mean like the camera API, like the geolocation API, the speech to text API, speech recognition API, whatever. There are many APIs in the web that gives you a hell lot of stuff to do. So yeah, so and these are some of the points that you should consider while like choosing web. And this is one of the most important point of choosing web. Like if you deploy a web app, there's an instant effect. Like you don't have to update the thing or install the thing, like unless and until it's a like pw or something which needs like explicit installation. I guess I haven't done it yet, but yeah. So yes, so it gets the effect is seen immediately. And this is one of the groundbreaking things that is happening in web right now. Like many of us have seen, heard that web is only about JavaScript. Web is only about like HTML, CSS, and the scripting language being JavaScript. But yeah, like nowadays researches have been made, and like this thing have been developed. I will go into it like a little bit later. But this thing has been developed, and it breaks the barriers. Like you can run C, C++, or any other like WebAssembly compatible languages on your browser, and that's basically a game changer. Like that is a tremendous game changer, especially for the fact that you need to do some heavy computation or some optimized computation, which you need some very low level languages like C or C++. So you can run C or C++ or anything, sorry, C or C++ or any other such compatible languages on your browser. So that's a very cool feature to have. So yeah, like these are some of the things that you should like what to say, like you should uh, take up as a motivation to learn more web development nowadays. And yes, let's move on to the next topic. Okay, so how the web works, like probably all of us have seen this example every now and then in any tutorial or any YouTube video or any other, like any diagrams or whatever, like how the google.com works. You type in something and the Google responds, right? So yeah, let's change the example. So yeah, so we will be taking an example of instagram.com. Like it's a small prank. I will be taking the same example but with a different URL. So yeah, so yes, this is how the whole workflow seems. Like don't get confused while seeing this. Like we will be breaking it down step by step. So here you are there, the end user. So you are typing something on your browser, like any URL, like instagram.com in this case. You can like type facebook.com or whatever in general. So you are typing this URL, you are hitting the enter. And then a request goes to the DNS server, because ultimately at the end of the day, every server has their own IP, which is the uniquely identifiable uniquely identifiable characteristic of a server. So for communicating to that server, you need that IP. But the DNS is basically a domain name service. So it's you can think of it just as a map of like names with IP addresses. So every name is mapped to some IP address. So yes, it hits the DNS server. The DNS server resolves this name to a URL, to a IP address, and then the IP address is hit. So basically, your request is like boiled down to IP address, and then it's communicated with the IP address. Now here sits the Instagram server. I'm not exactly sure about the IP address of Instagram, but yeah, like there will be an IP address for Instagram, right? So yeah, yes, that's it's connected, and then that's contacted basically. And when the server is hit, it basically responds with you with some of the files or some responses. For this purpose, we are taking that we are expecting some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files from the server. So this server responds to you with a HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files. Don't get confused with the names. Like yeah, just imagine that there are files. Okay, don't go further beyond that. These are all files. Like you have text file in your computer, right? So basically, HTML, CSS, JavaScript is also kind of that file with some specialties attached to it. So there comes the files, and it's the responsibility of a browser to parse those files as a meaningful website. Okay, so yes, that's how the web works. You enter the URL, it hits the DNS, DNS resolves it to an IP address. The IP address is then contacted. The server in the IP address responds to you with some valid response, or if it's unauthenticated or something, it throws you some error. So yeah, that's how web works. And I have attached a YouTube video link here also, so you can just check it out. Okay. So until now, any doubts? Like, are there any doubts or something, or shall I proceed? And also just confirm me once that is my speed okay, or shall I slow down or fast? I shall go fast. Like, okay, am I audible? Okay, yes, I am. Right. Okay, so this is how the web works, and now we shall go into like the main basic portion of web. Like one of the most important things that you have seen pretty much every time, that whenever you hit an URL in the server, like if hit an URL in your browser, like let's say you are entering the website of Hello World X. Okay, okay. So here, if you just see here, it says connection is secure, and like it seems that it's like says that connection is secure. Okay, now this URL, if you copy, yeah, so this URL says HTTPS. Now when you get some URL which doesn't have this HTTPS, instead it has an HTTP, the website will not open directly, and instead your browser will throw some warning that you are proceeding towards some other website. All of us thing, right? HTTP and HTTPS. So yes, regarding that, so here comes the HTTP and HTTPS. Like HTTP is basically a protocol for communication between the client and the server. Like you are the client and there is the server, right? Just as I shown that the Instagram server. So like for a protocol, I should say that a protocol is a set of rules that both of the parties need to follow to ensure a seamless communication. So yes, HTTP is a protocol that governs the communication between the client and the server, and data is just transmitted in plain text format. Okay, like from client you are sending some data. Like you can see here that there is one thing written, your information is private. So some information is sent to the server on demand, like if you need it. So in that case, data is transmitted in plain text format. Now what's the problem with plain text format? Let's say here is you, here are you, that you are sitting here and there is a server, and there is a hacker sitting in between like the client and the server. So he can, I mean, if he is successful to launch an interception attack, like some man in the middle or something, he will be very easily gaining access to the private data that you are sending from the client to the server, or vice versa. So yeah, this system is very much vulnerable to interception attacks. So what shall we do now? We need a remedy for this, right? So there comes the HTTPS. HTTPS is nothing but HTTP plus some additional security. Like you can say, like you are sending something uh, in a letter to you are sending a letter to your friend. You are just sending the bare what to say, the only the letter to your friend, so the letter is exposed to the whole world, like the whole post office and everything, one can see the letter. But if you wrap it in an envelope and then you send it, so no one can see the envelope. Like they can see the envelope, but they can't see the information inside. So the HTTPS is quite like that, like an additional security over HTTP. So yeah, so HTTPS basically uses a SSL or TLS encryption for the data. So even if, just as I said, that even if there's some man in the middle attack or some interception attack, the even if the attacker gets the data, he or she won't be able to decrypt. Like that will be completely encrypted data. So even if the interception attack is successful, there's a high probability that your data won't be compromised. So yes, to establish a proper SSL connection for HTTPS, you need a certificate, SSL certificate from a valid certificate authority. And once a website has an SSL certificate generated, so like you can use all the incoming requests to have an SSL protection over it. So like even if I don't, excuse me. So even if I don't type the HTTPS part, like let's say even if I don't type the HTTPS part and I type the only this URL, okay, it will just take up the HTTPS. Yeah, see, connection is secure. So by default, it routes that to the HTTPS. It routes the traffic to the HTTPS connection. So yes. So I have attached one of my blog links about HTTP and HTTPS here. You can check it out. And yes, so till now, like we have seen like what web workflow means to us, and like how the web works, how servers communicate, how clients communicate with the server, and how the whole flow happens. Like it's a very high level description of how the web works. Now let's get a little bit deep dive into it. So we get to know like how is the server interacting with the client, how the connection is becoming meaningful in the context of web. So yes, okay. So components of a web system. Now a web system can be a very complex one. Okay, like you can scale it up, and you can just add multiple security layers or feature or whatever you want to do it, scalability layers. So yeah, you can do a lot of stuff, but in the very bare minimum basic, what you need to have is a front end and a back end for the web. Now what do I mean by front end and a back end? Front end is basic, like previously I have told you, like we are using the client server, right? The user is the client. So basically front end is the client of the browser, and backend is a server that you are connecting to, like this one is a server, so you are connecting to this, and the backend responds to you with some valid response. So the front end requests and the backend response, kinda like that. If you see it in a very basic fashion, like there can be multiple instances in which both are communicating in a full duplex fashion, like front end is sending some data, back end is also sending some data. That's a separate concern, but otherwise, like this is the bare minimum basic of web like communication. So yeah, what is front end? Like as the name suggests, like what our user sees, like when you are clicking something or when you are approaching a website. So when you click on the website and it resolves and it connects to the server and it gets the file, so basically the browser parses the file and like creates a visual UI for you. Like let's say here we go, and here when we request, there's a lot of files coming, and there are some script tags as well. So the browser parses it. Okay, so yes, and that's what basically is like what the user sees at the end of the day, and it can be a very important benchmark for user experience, like the UI UX. Almost all of us have heard about this, right? The UI UX portion. So yeah, and then like many of us have a very like a bad misconception, like even I had a little time before as well. Like front end is just designing, like you just design stuff, you just change colors, you just change backgrounds, but ultimately it's not. Like front end is much more than designing. Like designing is a part of front end, and there are very other important parts of front end, very important parts of front end rather, that decides this user experience. Because ultimately at the end of the day, what matters to you is the user experience and how the user is liking your app, or on contrary disliking your app, like the web app. So yes, front end is just not designing. It's a very wrong myth. So it's about like figuring out like how your app would behave when the user interacts. So you have to like manage the states, you have to manage the click events, and so on and so forth. That there can be multiple things, multiple concerns that you have to handle with while designing a front end. So these are the primary pillars of front end: the HTML, the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So almost all of us have heard about this example as well. Like the HTML is the skeleton of the website, the CSS is the ornamentation, like the skin, the tissues, etc. And then the JavaScript, the brain. Like this is the ultimate, like this is the main like skeletal or the architectural like structure, and based on that, CSS is responsible for uh, enhancing the beauty of the website, and CSS is purely for designing. CSS is purely for designing the front end. The designing aspect of front end is mainly handled by CSS. and the JavaScript. Like just as I said, that you have to handle interactivity, you have to handle click events, you have to handle a lot of events. So JavaScript is there to handle all of those. So through JavaScript you can do this. So yeah, we are taking it like the brain. So in HTML, like if you are starting out with web development, I would highly suggest that you learn whatever is required. Like I myself have made this mistake. Like I have spent almost 1 month learning about HTML, and after 1 month of learning HTML, no result, because ultimately at the end of the day, if you couldn't build a project, or if you couldn't build something meaningful, the learning is of no use. So yeah, so like for HTML, I would highly recommend to go through these three topics, these two being the most important ones, like the tags and building a proper skeleton of the HTML part. And if you are like for a hackathon purpose, I would suggest these two are more than sufficient. And if you're building something for some production level app, like for a company or for freelance, like you have to maintain the SEO part. Like for SEO, it's search engine optimization. So whenever you search in Google, Google suggests you with some valid recommendations, right? So how does that happen? Through SEO, the search engine optimization. So yeah, you can go through this topic, but it's not very important in terms of hackathon purpose. But yeah, you can have a look at it. So for CSS purpose, these are some of the things that you will need to focus on while building for a, like while learning. And like when you are in a hackathon, you have to learn a lot of stuff. Like for the first hackathon, I remember I learned the full React. After going into the hackathon, I learned about React because I didn't know about React back then, like properly. So yeah. So yes, these are some of the things that you would need to learn about CSS, like link a style sheet. Like CSS is a style sheet that provides style to your app. So yeah, you have to link it to HTML. Like you can also do inline stylings and basic stylings and like relative units and layout. These are some of the advanced stuff I would suggest to like take a look at it, but like don't go too much deep into it. Like you will get to know these things a lot when you do projects. So yeah, don't learn just for the sake of learning. Learn and then implement. So that will be beneficial. And yeah, that's what I've said. Don't keep on learning CSS and rather learn by building. So yeah, like this is a meme. It's a very common meme, like building the whole app's business logic and learning to center a div using CSS. So yeah, centering as a div is a like a very crucial purpose, so as to speak. So yes, and yes, and now comes JavaScript. So like for the JavaScript part, you have the basic programming constructs of the like if you're familiar with any language like C, C++, whatever, like any type of language you're familiar with, JavaScript will be very easy for you to have a grab upon. So yeah, you can just go through the basic programming constructs in JavaScript. You can have a look about all these topics like functions and array and objects, like stressed and spread operators, and functions and first class citizens. And like this is one of the most crucial thing that you can have in terms of like JavaScript. So yeah, asynchronous programming in JavaScript. And these are some of the resources that you can use while learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Like MDN, like that's a very good resource, and that's a very like authentic resource, so as to speak, for these three topics. So yeah, like okay, so let's get a very basic hands-on how to like uh, use JavaScript. Okay. Okay, so yeah, let's first create a HTML file. So these are some of the HTML tags that you can work upon. Yes. So let's just open it with live server and just see how it looks. Yeah. So this is basically the HTML, like the H1 and the like I'm a paragraph. Like this is a paragraph text. Like just as I said that these are the tags and these are the skeleton. Basically, like if you format it, I don't know why it's not taking the formatting. Okay. So basically it's just like a skeleton, a tree-like structure. Like there is a body, the entry point for any HTML document. Then there is a element, and then there is another div element, and within the div there can be another element. So yeah, this is something that you can do like while learning about HTML. So this is the HTML part. Nothing very fancy. You have a lot of tags to deal with. So yeah, just go through the tags and things. And then like just as I said that you need CSS to do this. So like to do the styling. So yeah, let's do some CSS first. So like just I mentioned that there can be inline CSS. So yeah, inline CSS we can attach like let's say background color is red. Okay, sorry for my color sense. My color sense is too bad. Okay, so there you go. You have the red background color and you can tinker around with it, right? You can also have external style sheets, like external styles basically. Like let's say we are targeting the paragraph and you are just doing like background color blue and we are removing this. Or let's say we are doing it for H1. So see here H1 becomes blue. Huh. And like yes, this is some of the CSS part. This is not like if I start going on through the very basics of every HTML CSS or JavaScript, so it will be a very long like session. I won't be going deep dive into it, but I have given you the topics. You can access it there. I have just given you a basic intro of how things work, and you can also like have a external style sheets, right? Instead of having it in within the HTML file, you can have external style sheets and link that through the link tag. Sorry, why the auto suggestion is not coming? Yes, there you go, index.css. It works same. Now if I change it here to green, let's say, it works. So yeah, these are some of the things that you can do with CSS. Like there are multiple things that you can do with CSS, but this is just an intro of how the things like collaborate with each other. Okay, so these are the things. And like for the JavaScript part, you can also have like in file script tag, like you can use you're printing something in JavaScript. So yeah, if you just open it, you have this hello printed here, and you can also have like external JavaScript files. Sorry, and you can link it right there. Yeah, yes. See, I think it's not getting called. I don't know why. Script. Yeah, ignore this thing. Like yeah, there's this hello, and if I do it hello world right now here, so it will change. And yeah, it's changed. So this is how the three things interact, like the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And these are the basic building blocks. Like while you're building for a hackathon, even if you are not going through into various deep things like Next.js or server-side rendering or something, you can easily build up your prototype and you can easily like showcase your idea very well using these three things. Like there are many like instances of hackathon in which you just use plain HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and you can build completely like good looking website, and not only good looking, a properly functional website. So yeah, this is very helpful in case of hackathons in general. So yeah, coming back to the point, so this is the introduction of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So yes, now till now we have like seen a very basic collaboration of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now comes a very interesting part of JavaScript, which eventually leads to the main interactivity portion of the web, like how the things interact. Like let's say I am opening the same website. What the hell? Yes, I'm opening the same website. So let's say if you want to have a click, if you click here, the color changes to like it will show that it will have some click or something. Okay, so let's do it. Okay, let's first have a counter then. I think that will be preferable. Okay, so this is called DOM manipulation basically that I will be doing right now. Like the whole website is a document object model. Like it's a tree, and you can like it's called the document object model. Like this thing you can see, like this is the whole document, and this is like you can like model it as an object of like nodes or something. So yeah, so let's first target those nodes that we are targeting, like the h1. And the button. So yes, we are just targeting the h1 and the button. Now let's say we are as I said, like you can listen to the events. So yes, you can just listen to the events and like do some changes on your app. Like let's say whenever the button is clicked, I will print clicked here. So yeah, whenever I click, it prints clicked. And like whenever there is a click, the counter increments, let's say. So let int equal to 0. Okay, okay, sorry. Yes, I think it should work now. Yeah, see, it increments. So basically all these interactions, all these things, and all targeting the DOM nodes and everything. So this is basically called DOM manipulation, and it is achieved through JavaScript. And like with this only this simple amount of code, you have achieved the on click and everything. Like you can increment the counter. This is basically a counter app, right? So yeah, you have achieved everything. So just imagine, like if you like dedicatedly code a website in these three things, like the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, so you can do a lot of stuff. So yes, let's jump back into the PPT. Nice. Yes, so this was all about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Like due to shortage of time, I won't be able to cover everything, but yeah, these are some of the things that you need to have a look upon while building for a hackathon. So yeah, and make sure to have a look up over this. Like it's going to be a life-changing lesson for you. First of all, like you will be facing a lot of difficulties with asynchronous programming, but over a period of time you will improve, and yeah, you can just have a good grip over it once you are familiar with how it works under the hood. So yeah, yes, just as I said, like what is a state basically? Like this is the state, right? This is the state, and whenever I click on the button, the state changes, right? So here I have said that only, like state is the most tricky and important part of any application. Just as I said, like it's not only about designing, it's about handling the state, it's about manipulating the variables, it's about reacting to the events. So yes, state is the most tricky and important part of an application. And eventually when your app grows in size, you have multiple functionalities built on your app, So it becomes a little bit difficult to manage all the state, like repaint the whole DOM every now and then. So yeah, that becomes a headache kind of a thing when you like scale up for features. So yeah, so that's a very tricky portion of any web application in general. So that's where comes the savior, the front end frameworks. Like many of you, even if you haven't started with your web journey, you may have seen or heard about React, Angular, or Next.js, or like any other web pack bundler or something. Like these are some of the very common tools that are used in alliance with the front end frame. Like these are the front end frameworks basically, and these web packs and everything. These are used in alliance with these front end frameworks to have a very smooth development experience for the developers, because ultimately you are building for the users, you are concerned about the UX, but someone needs to be concerned about the developer experience as well. Yeah, so like they have made some front end frameworks for you to build. Okay, so every now and then a JavaScript framework comes into the picture. Like this is a legit meme. uh, so yes. Yes. So primarily, the web domain is now being ruled by these three frameworks. React is not typically a framework; it's a library. But for the sake of simplicity for this session, I will be treating both of these as a session, both of these as a framework. And this is Angular basically. So this is also a very robust, scalable, and like very uh, production ready framework. Like you can build very scalable and production ready apps using this very easily. But yeah, it has a little bit of more steep learning curve. So yes, but and also I have no experience whatsoever for Angular, so I won't be talking on this. So इसमें मेरा expertise नहीं है भाई. And yeah, I have worked with React. So yeah, it's about the React ecosystem. Like these are some of the frameworks that you can use for easing your development and like having a tad bit of advantage over the plain HTML, CSS, and JavaScript while building for features. And yes, okay. So before we jump deep into this, I would uh, show you this. Please don't do this. This is a night. This will ultimately become a nightmare for you, because I have seen many people jumping straight into React and then going down to HTML and CSS, and then again like going to and fro to React and HTML and CSS. Don't do that. First, have a basic grasp of this, and then go for React. So for hackathon purposes, you can just learn fast, and then after the hackathon, you can also just dive into the whole thing. So yes, that's about the whole thing. And in React, basically, there are a lot of things that you can focus on. There are a lot of things that you can learn, but I wouldn't suggest to go into everything at first, because it seems a little bit confusing when you just enter the React world. So you can follow this pathway, like why you are using React. Like first of all, be very clear about using something. Okay, not only React. Like just because it exists doesn't mean you have to use it in your project. Okay, so be very clear about why you are using React and why it is a library and not a framework. Like these two things you should start with, and then you can just go into some very basic React stuffs like the JSX part and how the React deals with the thing. Like when you are dealing with the this thing, like the vanilla JavaScript or the plain JavaScript, this is a whole chunk of like components, like not components, I shouldn't say components. This is a whole chunk of nodes or like elements, like h1 is an element, button is an element. So yes, but React mainly works on component architecture. Like if I break down this website in components, so this will be a component. Like this is a nav bar, this is a sidebar, this is a scroller view, this is a display view. So these are independent components, and often more than not, they are designed in separate files, like separation of concern. Because again, when the code grows, when your feature grows, it becomes very difficult if you just stack all of the thing in a single file. So yeah, React is basically driven by component architecture, and React have the states. Just as I said, that the state is very important in a web app. So React have those states, and React have also side effects like the use effect and the asynchronous effects one. And there are other like topics in React that you can master. So yeah, global data store, React router, etc., etc. So you can have a look at it for React. Now, in terms of hackathon or in pursuit of winning a hackathon or building something for the hackathon for the first time, I wouldn't recommend to go further beyond React if it's your first time, because that will be a little bit time consuming, and there are chances that you may not be able to complete the product fully. So I would suggest like go till React in the context of hackathon. But when you are like learning, like you learn like you wish to learn something beyond React, you can just go to Next.js. So basically what Next.js is built on top of React, and almost if you have a very good grip on React, like Next.js is very easy to learn. Like it like I have said, like it's React.js on steroids. Like it gives you some additional advantages and features on the fly, like you are writing React code only in Next.js file, but yeah, it gives you something like off the board, and it just comes up bundled with it. So yeah, and also one of the advantages of Next.js is that it's a full stack framework, so you can have your integrated backend in Next.js within the same code base. So yes, that's about it. So just let's recap. Like there is the front end and the back end, and the front end is just about designing. No, it's not about designing. Just remember this one thing. Like front end is what user sees, but that doesn't imply that it's completely about designing. It's about how your user sees and how your user interacts, and then the user sees again. So you have to design the whole flow. These are some of the things that you should learn for the front end. Yeah. Okay. So for learning the front end, I wouldn't suggest to follow a single video, because that may be a little bit tiring and a little bit like confusing as well. So learn topic wise. I've given the topics, and yeah, and please like work on projects. Don't just keep on learning. Implement them in projects, even if it's a very basic counter app. Okay, like build projects. That's good actually. So after we finish the front end, let's move on to the back end. So yeah, backend is basically like at first you may not be able to visualize what a backend is if you are just stepping into the web world, but eventually when you interact with web systems, and eventually when you interact with developers who work in the backend part, excuse me, who work in the backend part, you will eventually get to know like how the backend works, and like what backend means to the whole web system. Like it's also a very integral part of the system. So it's basically the server side logic, and deals with the continuous flow of data, enabling a seamless experience. Too much of jargon here, so ignore this jargon words. Just simply understand that you need some data, you request to the server, you request to the backend gives you some data if you are a legit user, and you can just use that data in your front end. Backend can be centralized, the Web 2.0, and it can also be decentralized, like the Web 3.0 or the blockchain. And like various authentication and authorization strategies are implemented for proper content access on the backend. So again, due to shortage of time, I won't be able to showcase all of this. But yeah, if when you dive deeper into the backend, you will get to know about all this. And why backend? Like this is a question I get asked a hell lot of time. So why would we eventually learn a backend? So these are some of the reasons, like offload the CPU intensive logic. So like you are editing a video, like or some encoding some video or whatever. So that requires a very huge amount of CPU power or huge amount of computation. So do you want to do that on client side? No. Like client can be dealing it from a laptop, or like client can be dealing it from a mobile as well. So the mobile's computational capacity is not as strong as the laptop, right? So why take chances? So do that on the server as well. So yes, you can offload the CPU intensive logic, proper authorization and controlled access of content, and protecting the secrets like database password and auth secrets. Like often more than not, like you need some database passwords or passkeys to connect to a database, to connect to a cloud, to connect to any third party authentication, so on and so forth. So if you just do all the code in the front end, eventually you will be exposing the whole keys in the front end, right? Because ultimately at the end of the day, front end you can see here. The backend code you can't see, but you can see the front end code. So yeah, that's a security concern. So we definitely need a backend. And yeah, this is a very cool backend developer. So how does the front end and back end communicate? Front end and back end basically communicates through API. Now, what is an API? Again, like too much of recursive questions, right? First, we go into what is a backend, then we go into why backend, and then we go into how does the front end and backend communicate. So, yes, and then we have the API. So again, I have linked one of my blogs. Again, खुद का promotion कर रहे हैं हम. Okay, so you can read about it. Like if I click here, yeah, this is like what is an API and all those stuffs. So yeah, I have linked it in the PPT. Okay. So okay, now APIs. It's application programming interface. Yeah, that's a very bookish definition to look at it. But in very simple words, APIs are nothing fancy. There's just a list of routes exposed from the backend. Like you can hit those routes with proper credentials, proper access tokens, whatever, and you can just get valid data. And often more than not, you will be hearing this term when you are developing in backend, CRUD, create, read, update, delete. Like if you think about it like carefully, when you are scrolling any app, like let's say Facebook or Instagram, you are doing these four things only: creating, like you are posting something, you're creating an account. These are some of the creating steps. Reading, you are scrolling the Instagram and new posts are coming. So you are basically doing a read operation on the database. You are updating, like let's say you have made a spelling mistake on your Facebook post and you just update it. So that's an update operation. And you just delete basically. So yes, these are the very basic and granular operations that you can imagine of while building an API, and these are the things that you will eventually be implementing on the backend. So yes. So how can you learn a backend? Till now you have learned HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? Like for the sake of this session, till now you have been familiar with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now how to learn backend? If you are new to the backend, again, I will be telling from both the perspective. If you are learning for a hackathon perspective, you can learn a scripting language. But since you have learned JavaScript here, so you can learn any scripting language for backend, and I would prefer JavaScript in the case, because for learning a language and doing both of the things is very beneficial in a hackathon. So yeah, and for other languages as well, you can implement a backend to those. So yeah, you can learn a scripting language properly, and every language has its own framework for server-side development. Like for JavaScript, you have Express.js, Nest.js. For Python, you have Flask, Fast API. For Rust, you have a Rocket framework. So yeah, and after learning that, just go on and create some very basic API routes with dummy data points. Like, for example, I would suggest that you create a authentication API, like two APIs only: sign up and login. Okay. Through this, you will be gaining basic knowledge about APIs and how the things work. And you, in the later part of the backend, you will get to know about this, like what is authentication and authorization, and various the auth strategies, basically, like JWT. And many times we have seen like there is one thing called sign in with Google. So that's basically called OAuth. Like you are using some third-party service, like third parties auth server, and you are authenticating based on that. So yeah, that's basically OAuth. That's a separate concern and not a part of today's session, but you can look at it. Okay, now the very most important part of the session: managed backends. Like while building a backend, you need to while building a product, you need a backend. And for while building a backend, you need to do a lot of setups. Like you need to set up a database, you need to set up course policies, you need to set up a server to serve to run the backend, which will serve the requests. So for hackathon, I would suggest like use managed backends, and in daily life as well, I have used quite a lot these things. So yeah, you can use managed backends like that completely uh, what to say, like that completely removes all your setup concerns. Like you don't have to freaking set up everything. Okay, like just you can, for example, we can just take up an example of like Supabase maybe. I don't know if I am signed in. Yeah. So in my dashboard, I have the projects here. Okay. So yeah, let's say I have this project. Okay. It's more of a Shutdown project. I think this will work. Okay, this is also expired. Nice. Okay, so like there are some of the projects like you can also like create a project. Like if I create a project like test project. Yeah, so basically what you can see here, like you have a SQL database, you have authentication on the go, like you can also use OAuth here. You can have storage, like to store files, to store images, to store profile pictures. You can have like edge functions, like serverless functions. So yeah, I would highly prefer using managed backends in terms of hackathon. So yes, you can choose any one of these. Almost all of them have the same features and facilities. Like you can, once you learn a thing efficiently and properly, you will just be very easily able to switch to the other stuffs. Why it gets switched? Okay, okay. So yes, that's about managed backend. So this is a very important thing that you should learn while building up for hackathons. And yes, till now, like you have been building some APIs, right? Like I have told you, like when you will be seeing this video after some time and you will be building some APIs, so you will be doing it with some dummy data and sources, right? But in real world, we don't do that, right? You can't just throw in johndoe at the gmail.com for every user, okay? And password is 1234. So don't do that. Otherwise, everyone gets the access. Okay, so we have been operating with static and dummy data sources, right? So what if that becomes dynamic? Like you have your data, forget about databases, you have your data containers, data storage set up, and you are allowing users to like insert their own data and retrieve their own data from your site. So yeah, that in that case it will be more interesting, right? Because that will be a completely interactive application, so as to speak. So yes, so up to maza aayega definitely. So once you reach till this portion, you are more of a seasoned developer, and you basically know that how API works, how APIs interact, how to set up a server if you are setting up one. But yeah, but when you are going to the database, I recommend it like after learning the backend for some weeks, maybe like 1 or 2 weeks, because database is completely a separate concern. Like many of the people, like they interchange database with like servers. I don't prefer that. So yeah, database is completely a separate concern. So yeah, it's a persistent data storage for serving and storing user centric data. And please, like, for God's sake, please just have a look at this in any of the YouTube videos and articles or whatever. You will get to know a lot about database. Like why use database? Again, well, I just as I said before, that just because something exists doesn't mean you have to use it. So why you will use database? Okay, so like have a look over this. For summing it up, I would suggest that it's a bit, it's more of a smart file system, you can say. And there are many paradigms for databases like SQL and NoSQL. Again, for the hackathon perspective, I would prefer NoSQL, because like the schema is flexible. Like in hackathon, you are doing some rapid development, right? You can't just go on with a fixed schema for a long time. You, like, it's a very rapid development. You are editing the schema every now and then, and you can't change the code right every time. So I guess NoSQL is a go-to for for hackathons. Otherwise, for other purposes, you can also have SQL databases like PostgreSQL or Microsoft SQL Server. So yes. So while learning a database, don't just jump straight into coding apps. Like you just open YouTube and you just open like how to build apps using MongoDB or something. Don't do that. First, get a little bit hint of how the database works in general. Like database is much more than coding the, apps. Okay, like there are stored procedures, stored functions, many things are there, which is database centric, completely database centric, that doesn't require any programming language or something. That's completely database scripting. So yeah, first have a look at those, and then you can jump into coding apps. But for hackathon purposes, you can just directly use ORMs if you are comfortable with. Okay, so the fun part, ORM. So like often we are intimidated by the SQL queries and some things, right? Some things like SQL queries, the joins and stuff. Like whoever have seen those things, like they are dreadful at times. The query becomes too long, and you have to just debug it, and you have to scale it and whatever. So for hackathon purposes and for the testing purposes or something, you don't have to do so much of that. ORM is one of those things that it will help you a lot while building for hackathons. So you can use ORMs. ORM is basically object relational mapping. Too much of jargon words again here, but I will explain it in simple terms. Okay, so let's say I'm just drawing a table. Let's say you have a user table like this, password. Okay, so while for selecting all the users, you can just do select start from users where username equal to ABCD, let's say. Okay, so this is a simple query, but eventually when you scale up, the query becomes complex. So you need to have a firm grip over the SQL syntax. For hackathons, you don't have so much of time to write code, like to write database code and stuff. So people came up with ORM. Okay, that's a very cool thing actually. ORM treats these tables or like the documents or the collections as objects. Like what ORM will do? ORM will give you a user's class, and you can just do like find by. Let's say I'm not talking anything specific about any specific ORM, but yeah, these are some of the methods that may syntactically differ, but like ideally these are some of the methods that any ORM exposes. Sorry, find by username ABC. Excuse me. Okay, so these and this are almost same, just they are syntactically different, but they are doing the same work. Now when you are building something in a very rapid fashion, which one is more convenient? This one is, right? Like this thing, because you are already dealing with this syntax in your programming language, so it's very easy to like use those in your code. So yeah, that's where ORM comes into picture, and here it is. So basically DB tables are treated as objects, and instead of DB queries, like database queries, by DB I mean to say database, we use the proper programming pattern like native Python or JavaScript code to read and write the database. And there are many vulnerabilities when you write raw SQL code. Like there is one vulnerability, you can read about it like in any from any resource, like SQL injection. Like you corrupt the SQL query from the using the user input, and you just basically intrude into the system. Now you can manually like do some checks and prevent that, but that's a lot of work. So ONS comes up with bundle with those features like query sanitization, like sanitizing any illegit or possibly harmful characters from the query from the input. So that's one of the features of ORM. And automated migrations, like I said, like there can be like rapid schema changes throughout the hackathon. So every time you change the schema, you need to notify the database, right? Like, hey, I've changed the schema. So you need also to change your internal schema. So the database gets to know about it, and database internally does something and just changes its table structure and whatever. So ORMs help with that a lot, like automated migrations. Like you, these like changing schema is basically called as migrations. So it automates the migrations. You don't have to write big queries to migrate. Rather, you can just use some command line stuffs or something using the ORM to automate the migration. So this is the whole flow of a web system that you can imagine of for a web application. Like there's the server and the client. More explicitly, I'm showing you that here the client requests the server takes the request, it interacts with the database, fetches some data, and it again sends the response. Server, web server contacts the database response, database response, contacts the database response, and with the particular response parsed in its own fashion, the web server returns the response to the client. And this is how the whole client works. This is how the whole client side, you are saying now that you are clicking a button and something is happening, you are clicking up the add post and some post is getting added. So behind the scenes, this is the whole flow. Okay, so now till now we have gone through the very nitty gritties of how to build a website or a web app in general. Now, in sometimes having a deployed app is beneficial for hackathons, and even if that's not a mandatory for a hackathon, you have built it from like scratch, like so like you want to showcase it to people, even if even the app is good for your resume as well, like the web app is very good for your resume, like you add it and if you provide the deployed link there, so that's a very big advantage. So how to like deploy, like forget about deploy, uh, often we have seen like google.com or something.com. So how do these things come? Because when you run on your system, it shows you something like this, localhost. Okay, now this is my localhost. Now if you just use your localhost and press 5500, like localhost colon 5500, you won't be seeing this because it is running in my local system and my localhost is pointing to my local system as well. So how to like make the app accessible to the whole world? So that's where deployment comes in. Now let's take a scenario basically. So I have coded a web app. Wanna see? This is a meme basically. So give me the link, and she gives the link like HTTP localhost 3000, and the boy tries it. But eventually, when the boy types in localhost 3000 in his computer, it just like shows the screen, which is not a very like good thing to have. So yeah, that's a snap screen basically. So how the boy will now see the web app built by the girl? So in that case, like yes, you also can flex your web app once it's deployed. So in that case, you have to deploy the web app. And by deploy, I'm like it may seem a little bit tricky at first, but by deploy, I just mean hosting or simply running your app in some remote. Like here in VS Code, we are running it in localhost 5500 using the localhost server, right? Or let's say the local server like this live server, one of the extensions of VS Code. You can also use other server as well. Now this is a server. This client is acting as a, this computer is acting as a server for this. Now, what if we can just do this thing in a remote VM? And again, by remote, I mean to say a VM which is quite far away from us. The clouds, like I've put it here. So the like the clouds, and that remains active throughout and answers all the incoming requests to your app. So eventually, a question comes that can't we deploy our apps on our local system? Like I have a computer, I have a RAM, I have a processor. So why can't we deploy our system, right? So here comes two major problems. Excuse me. You have to keep your machine on for 24 hours. You if you just want to cater to the users for the whole day, and you need to have an internet facing router. Like even if you capture your own IP address from the router, it is not technically internet facing. So you can just directly hit the router. So for that, to make it globally accessible, using a cloud provider is a better option. Like this alleviates all these things. So using a cloud provider is a better option. So these are some of the cloud providers. Okay, so now comes like there are some things that you need to recap. Like there was this front end, right? And then there came the back end, right? So eventually, front end can be deployed through some steps, and eventually back end can also be deployed through some steps. And the providers are different for both of those. Okay. So for front end development, we have Vercel, Netlify, and Firebase. And trust me, if you just get familiar with one of these, now, like these are super easy. The deployment steps are super easy. You just need to type in some very basic build commands or something that you do here as well, like in your command, like in your CMD or VS Code terminal in general. So you just configure those in Vercel, and Vercel automatically takes care of it. Okay, and Netlify and Firebase. And the most interesting part about all these cloud providers is what you know, like they have automated CI/CD pipeline. By CI/CD, what I mean, continuous integration and continuous deployment. If I am not wrong, I shall consult the full form again, because I get a little bit confused every time. Okay, leave it. So basically, what CI/CD basically means is like that whenever you push some changes to your code base, the changes are automatically reflected to the website, to the backend server. So this is basically called CI/CD. So automated CI/CD pipeline is given by these providers. So whenever you once you configure, whenever you push some code into the version, like push some code into GitHub repo, you can just it automatically reflects on your website after a short period of time, because they have pre-configured it. And for backend deployment, you can have Render, Heroku, Railway. Like these are some of the very like good providers for deployment. Okay, so till now we have also deployed our web app. Okay, so after deployment, we will be circulating the web app, right, to our friends, to our like acquaintances. So one of the errors that I have faced, and possibly you guys will also face after deployment, like तबाही मचा देता है पूरा ये वाला, the CORS error, the infamous CORS error. Like often more than not, we have seen this error. Like here, if we just run a server in our local machine and we don't properly configure the CORS, you will see a CORS error here. Access to some resources not allowed. So what basically CORS is? Okay, so let's dive deep into it. Now, when your URL is, let's say, abc.com, your front end URL is abc.com, and your backend is hosted as api.abc.com, right? So both of them are different origin, because abc.com and api.abc.com can be same. So for requesting content from api.abc.com, abc.com is a like another domain for api.abc.com. So API, how does api.abc.com know that whether it's a legit request, right? So yeah, cross origin resource sharing, like both the origins are sharing resources with each other. And why it's needed? Because it's used to restrict illegit and bot access to your resources. Like let's say if you don't have proper CORS configured, okay, like not really bot access, I would say. I have forgotten to delete this, because yes, sorry for that. I don't know why it's not saved. Okay. Used to restrict illegit access. Like you don't have access to the particular API or particular backend, so the backend will immediately like throw an error that you don't have an access. So that's a CORS error basically. And if you just whitelist your origin, like the URL from which you are requesting the resource from the backend, so if you just whitelist the origin, eventually you will get a valid response. So this is how CORS deals with. Again, CORS is a very big topic and it's not possible for me to cover it in this session. But yeah, you can have the documentation link here. You can go through it. And after all these things, there are multiple things that you can explore in web. So yeah, like you can explore a lot of things in web, but yes, these are some of the things that you can have a look at. But for the perspective of hackathon, just as I started in the session, with in the session, like for the perspective of hackathon, you need to know some very basic propagandas or some guidelines that you need to follow while building a web app for hackathons. Like first of all, don't focus too much on design, okay, because eventually the features will matter. Your design won't matter that much. Yeah, I am not saying that you just put 3 divs here and you just show the app, but with minimalistic styling, you can have a fair chance if your features are good and if your features are properly implemented. So these are some of the things that you can do in hackathon. Second thing is, don't go for any type of manual setup while coding a web app in hackathon. Like try to avoid custom backends for hackathon. Like design custom backend for hackathon only if it is like utmost needed. So yeah, that's a second thing, like use managed backends. And thirdly, try to use the third party services in hackathons for building web apps. Like there are multiple third-party services. Like let's say Auth0. I'm not remembering any other name, so I took one of the name Auth0. So it basically gives you a full-fledged OAuth and everything, authentication, role-based authentication, and everything on the go. You don't have to set up anything. You just need to have a key. So you can use these things as well while building a web app for hackathon. So that will save you a lot of time, and your user flow and the authentication flow will eventually be quite better compared to what you can build within some stipulated time period, because ultimately there is a human capability to do things. So yeah, and last but not the least, I would like love to show some of the more things. Like I've talked about databases right here. Like there are some obvious concerns, like how do I get these databases up and running for storing the data, right? Setting up one in your own system can be a choice, but again, as I said, don't go for setups while building for a hackathon. You can easily have multiple already like managed databases. Like for MongoDB, you have MongoDB Atlas. Like it's the MongoDB on cloud. You can just sign in and get started. And for PostgreSQL, you have the Supabase. Like yeah, you have the Supabase, the database basically. Yeah, so you can just use it as a PostgreSQL. You also have other database providers as well. You can also use, like, just as I have shown here, like this thing, the railways. So yeah, you can also use railways for database deployment. So yeah, these are some of the things that you would be needing while building for a hackathon. And yes, that's about all of the thing that I could sum it up within the time. So yeah, this is all the session PPT, and I guess all the links are embedded here as well. So yeah, that's the end of the session. So that's it from my side, I guess.
Okay, so that's a wrap for the amazing web dev session that we had. I would
Thank you.
like to extend my heartfelt thank you to Krishnendu for being a part of Hello World Hacks, for being our web dev mentor and inspiring our participants through your insightful knowledge. I think today's session was not only informative, like we had fun through all the memes that you shared.
Thank
So
you.
we had a great time. We had a great time. And I think all the participants who joined today's live session, they learned something from you, and they will be using them in their upcoming hackathons. It would only add up to their CV and resume, right? So yep, I would like to thank all the participants as well who joined our live session. Thank you for joining us. And okay, thank you, Dada, for being a part of us. Thank you for
Thank you
giving
so much.
some time of your precious schedule. Thank you. And so, yes, stay coding, keep building, and never stop learning. So, until next time, have a great time, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and all the very best for hackathon, everyone.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nature, I guess we are off with